Thanks,
Colleagues,
Sarah.
oh, you're amazing. Let's move to the legendary AJ. So, Alison-Jane Hunter. AJ, please feel free to share your screen if you'd like to, or speak straight to us. But can I say AJ is currently enrolled in her second doctorate, having recently completed her novel that she's just sent off to publishers and an exegetical component as well. AJ is joining us deep in the night in the United Kingdom. She is a great blessing to us. She's not only an astonishing writer, she's also simply the greatest teacher I've ever had the pleasure to meet. And she speaks to us today about the gift and the challenges of regional education. So AJ is going to speak to us round the title, Regional Teaching and Learning, with a particular focus on cultural capital. AJ, all yours, my darling.
Thank you. I think I will just talk to you. I think that's more straightforward. So I have recently, last couple of years, moved into regional teaching, and I have spent all this time trying to work out how I can truly connect with my students and how I can support them and release their innate brilliance. So in Australia, teaching and learning in a regional setting are vastly different from a metro area, which is what I'm used to. Much of this stems from the geospatial reality of Australia's size, which can lead to social, political, and economic isolation. The complexities are often covert and frequently presented in a simplified way, such as teaching to a fashionable strand of the pastoral care curriculum. This undermines both the individuality of students and the pedagogical purpose of such adjustments. Teaching to one strand of a cohort, for example, rather than to a divergency of active learners, or teaching metro ideas of cultural capital and how they define student groups in terms of class, is both patronising and infantilising for a differently sophisticated cohort. Where Bourdieu contends that cultural capital is class dependent, perpetuating socioeconomic inequality in a more socioeconomically flattened regional society where high financial rewards are available for skilled and semi-skilled physical work as much as for highly educated conceptual work. A more sophisticated reading of the pedagogical requirements of each cohort is needed. So consideration of how to lift cultural capital amongst regional young people, thereby raising the status and outcomes of secondary schooling in particular, is necessary from a moral as well as an economic standpoint. After all, if young people cannot see themselves and their lives reflected in the concepts and tasks presented, they will legitimately reject the thinking and likely outcomes as irrelevant. This thinking is crucial because it lies in the realms of hearts and minds, rather than mandates and punishments. Furthermore, and specifically, if young women, and I actively include all LBQTIA plus women in this term, cannot see themselves within the proposed teaching and learning because their social expectations are more governed by oppressive traditional values than those of their male peers, then educators have a massive problem of lack of aspiration that's gendered as well as intergenerational to solve. A practical and relevant definition of cultural capital can be found in Swidler and Farkas's assessment of the need for an adaptive set of cognitive skills, encompassing literacy, shared conceptual, cultural, and historical knowledges, mathematical and analytical reasoning, paired with an adaptive set of behavioral skills encompassing achievement motivation, self-regulation, and delay of gratification, the old marshmallow test. Both approaches to teaching and learning are highly associated with academic and occupational success. An examination of these adaptive foundational skills suggests that this approach would make sense in a regional town founded on, say, heavy industry. Such a town's fortunes and those of its inhabitants are very reliant on specific industries, often only one in each town, and the work generated. Whilst agricultural, creative, health, education and retail work are available in most regional areas, the primary foci for the towns often lie in heavy industry, such as mining, frequently with a large tranche of what Tara talked about, highly mobile FIFO workforce. The mining industry is a dominant employer in regional towns, potentially bringing regeneration as it draws in outsiders to regional centres for work. The risk is where heavy industry dominates the town's fortunes to such an extent that the town is reliant on industry rather than having industry reliant on the town. As such, the balance of power can dispossess regional centres and undermine the hopes and dreams of those who live there long term. So in the last census, which was in 2021, of a sample regional town, we can see clearly that work is available and that it's possible to have only one parent in full-time paid work and the other in unpaid work, supporting traditional gender roles. The percentages of people working as technicians and trade workers at 17.4% and machinery operators and drivers 15.2% far outnumber South Australian and Australia-wide percentages, with lower percentages for all other types of work, including professionals. To reinforce this image, iron smelting and steel manufacturing in this sample town employ 12.8% of the population, where the numbers are 0.3 and 0.2 for South Australia and Australia as a whole. Whilst at the top echelons, engineers require a wide range of innovative, creative and technical skills, that becomes less true in specialised semi-skilled work such as train driving, which is far more automated. Nonetheless, the supporting infrastructure of train drivers, labourers, furnace operators and so forth have access to significant remuneration without necessarily requiring innovative skills, and this skews the perceived learning needs of young people. These then are the key career pathways young people can see if they stay in their hometown with their own extended familial networks. In order to achieve these work-based pathways, there are often two key tertiary training providers. So in the area I'm in, UniSA, soon to be part of the merged Adelaide University, and TAFE. Obviously, other RTOs provide technical and vocational training as well. In 2025, courses available at regional centres of UniSA include early childhood education, primary education, secondary education, social work, ageing and disability, human services, nursing, midwifery, physiotherapy and occupational therapy. Whilst these courses align with the professional needs of regional towns, it's concerning to note how limited the range of courses is. Whilst other courses such as creative writing, humanities and sciences can be accessed online, with Flinders University currently offering 20% discount on all online courses, the experience of university life is very constrained unless young people are willing to leave regional towns and study in capital cities, either locally or interstate. Accommodation is often available for students in the capital cities, but young people may be placed in an unfamiliar melting pot if they make this choice, often removed from their families and communities. Unlike British young people who largely expect to move location to go to university, South Australian students expect to study locally as a result of expat funding models. Alongside the UniSA offering, TAFE has mirroring courses, with the exception of its applied engineering courses, age and disability services, children's education and care, civil, structural and mechanical engineering, electrical and renewable energy, and then, interestingly, hairdressing, hospitality, literacy and numeracy, manufacturing and welding, and short courses in aged and disability services, first aid and hospitality. Although the regional tertiary training providers are open and welcoming, teaching staff may be less active in the research field, as the accessible pay rates reflect the way that direction and research come from the city. Tertiary teaching can be more dissemination of city-based information than taught by a local researcher. Finally, admission grades may well be lower for regional universities, reflecting the patronising view that less should be expected from regional students. If the jobs available determine career choices and expectations, these choices are more narrowly defined again by decisions taken about the quality, cultural capital and expectations of regional secondary students. Families may accept that the more accessible options as a result of their experience of the jobs overtly available. How can these expectations be expanded without an implied deficit model being applied? Surely negotiations must be careful, delivered over time and follow a transparent, explicit model that values and aligns with the positive local cultural capital of the region without imposing unfamiliar values and negative assumptions. One of the ways of giving students greater levels of choice through cultural capital is to build onto the Australian curriculum, R210 version 9, and SACE 2025, which is for year 11 and 12. These are for the general capabilities. These are fundamental to both curricula, yet often downplayed in the face of pressures from subject content. The 7 SACE general capabilities reflect and develop the Australian curriculum general capabilities. Literacy, numeracy, information and communication technology, critical and creative thinking, personal and social capability, ethical understanding and intercultural understanding. These theoretically taught since reception mirror the adaptive cognitive cultural capabilities above, but without the theoretical foundations being made explicit. Hence, it's arguable that what they require is to be made more visible, not less, and to be connected to the adaptive behavioural skills that will lift desire into outcome, hope into concrete pathways to success. There are scopes and sequences that could be used as vehicles for making these learnings far more explicit and valued through review or topic progression and even low-stakes formative testing processes. In the junior and middle years, this could be foregrounded through extant lines such as well-being and pastoral care. There is historical evidence that bringing in overarching curricula such as learning to learn or child protection and so forth can be foregrounded successfully through these flexible lines. What's necessary is research into the purposes and uses of such lines and their impact on student development over time. In the senior years, this could perhaps and even perhaps should be emphasised and reinforced through lines such as EAF or AIF, which it used to be research project, and individual studies for particular subject areas. If taught effectively, each adaptive cognitive and behavioural skill should be identifiable by students and utilisable for methodology sections of any research and or passion project, such as the AIF in stage 2. In regional schools, this teaching can also be affected strongly by the type and experiences of staff members. Regional schools have disproportionate numbers of early careers, special authority to teach, and overseas trained staff. This should be made, and frequently is, a huge advantage through effective in-house training. After all, it's often the outsider who can observe fresh opportunities and nuances simply by asking the crucial question, why, when presented with social majority norms. This is invigorating for otherwise stable societies. If those who've always worked within a regional setting focus on this question and make cognitive and behavioural adaptations alongside the outsiders to the system, then clarity, engagement and dynamism should ensue to the betterment of all stakeholders in ways that are appropriate and enriching to the local community. To me, one of the key areas not yet fully explored for inculcating dynamic aspirations based on cultural and scientific knowledges is careers education. I'm therefore going to propose a structured tinkering model and other forms of educational research design that foreground careers education as a mechanism for delivery of cultural understandings. The research design could then be aligned with the two key moral values established earlier, A, respect for prior knowledge, however divergent, and B, a refusal to impose hierarchical values on choices, as it's right and sufficient that a range of choices is truly available and accessible to each student, regardless of traditional approaches to expectations. Using a range of clear, inclusive definitions is an obvious starting point for implementing explicit cultural capital innovations and strategies at a whole school level. Given that the capabilities are mandated, this should be a process revision and renewal rather than new work. These definitions, co-constructed with former and current students, can then be tinkered with for appropriacy to year groups and individual year levels, according to the student's cognitive understandings, that is, differentiated according to learning readiness. Second stage is to trace or cross-map the agreed patterns of cultural capital learning across the extant curriculum, highlighting where concepts are taught already through a series of checks, for example, via daily review, and low-stakes testing, e.g. through Kahoot or similar, in, for example, careers or pastoral care settings. This process should be very reassuring as cultural capital is uncovered and highlighted, with ownership equitably shared across all stakeholders. Step 3 is to monitor the impact of the now explicit teaching and learning of cultural capital and its concomitant dynamic skills and aspirations. It should be evident in accessible patterns such as career choices, independent study choices, and pastoral care support, where it can be built into resilience and other PBIS or whatever types of strategies that also seek to engage the whole child. In this way, teaching, learning, monitoring, and evaluation are easy additions to the work already taking place in regional schools, adding to key data sets rather than either being imposed or even detracting from the valuable work already being undertaken. Once monitoring has happened, celebration is easy to generate and establish. In the past, I've used poster campaigns, social media recognition, and so forth for those showing the adaptive, cognitive, and behavioural skills needed for aspiration and success. I strongly recommend allowing former and current students' voices to be clear and forward-facing in regional communities in particular. Students need role models that they recognise as familiar. So seeing and celebrating success of their own local peers and community will always have a greater impact than the objective statistics schools are required to generate for external agencies, crucial as these can be to funding and national measurements of targets and goals. Those who've engaged in these celebrations are the obvious leaders of the next wave of the revolution. Schools need to trust that they've taught their students great skills and allow them to guide and support the younger students. Such systems of peer mentoring are widely available and have huge benefits, including vivifying programs and taking time pressure off teachers. Finally, I would argue that all such programs must be living programs and therefore subject to review. We need to build on success, not failure, so that all program design is inherently positive, comprehensive, research-driven, as well as morally, culturally, and diversity inclusive. Thank you.